Diane Kowalski snatched the bouquet from 7-year-old Nadia's hands and threw it into the storm drain at the edge of Willow Bend Court. "Get this trash off my street before I call ICE on every one of you," she screamed, close enough that her spit landed on the polished tips of Marcus Bennett's shoes. The groom did not move. His new wife, Simone, stood frozen in ivory silk, one hand pressed flat against her chest as if she could hold her own heart in place. 60 guests went silent. Somewhere behind them, a string quartet kept playing, because no one had told the musicians to stop, and for 3 or 4 unmemorable seconds the only sound on Willow Bend Court was a cello and a woman's ragged breathing. Go back 2 hours, and none of this had happened yet. At 2 in the afternoon, Cedar Hollow estates smelled like cut grass and warm asphalt, the kind of Saturday heat that makes ice melt in glasses before anyone drinks it. White folding chairs sat in 6 even rows on the Bennett lawn at 4 and 12 Willow Bend Court. A caterer in a black apron arranged deviled eggs on a mirrored tray. Marcus stood in the driveway in his tuxedo, adjusting a small brass lapel pin shaped like a magnolia blossom, the city flower of Cedar Hollow, Georgia. His father had worn the same pin at every council meeting for 11 years before he died. Marcus touched it now the way other men touch a rosary. He did this without thinking. He had done it every morning for 6 years, since the day he was sworn in as the youngest mayor in Cedar Hollow's history. Nobody on Willow Bend Court knew that. That was the point. Marcus Bennett had bought the house at 412 2 years before he ever ran for city council, back when he was a 31-year-old Parks Department analyst with a used Honda and a mortgage that scared him. He kept it that way on purpose. No city car in the driveway, no plaques on the wall facing the street. When neighbors waved, he waved back and said good morning and nothing else, because his grandmother, Ruth Bennett, had taught him that a man who has to announce his position has usually already lost the room. Ruth had served on that same council for 40 years, the first black woman ever elected to it, and she had done it in a Cedar Hollow where half the town would not shake her hand. She used to tell Marcus, over sweet tea on her porch, that dignity is a muscle, not a costume. You build it in private so it holds up in public. He believed her. He had built his whole adult life around that sentence. Which is why at 2:40 that afternoon, when the doorbell rang next door and Diane Kowalski stepped out onto her own porch to see what the noise was, Marcus was still just the quiet neighbor in the blue-shuttered house. Not the mayor. Not yet. Diane Kowalski was 54 years old and owned Kowalski Premier Grounds, a landscaping company that had held the exclusive contract for Cedar Hollow's public parks for 5 straight years, worth just over $2 million a year in city money. She kept her lawn edged to the inch. She organized the Willow Bend Court Christmas light contest. She had, 3 winters ago, driven Mrs. Alvarez next door to her hip replacement surgery and back, twice, without being asked. People on the street called her a good neighbor, and for years, in most of the ways people measure that, she was. But Diane also kept a mental ledger nobody saw, one where certain families belonged on Willow Bend Court, and certain families were, in her private words, changing the character of the neighborhood. She had said as much to her husband Harold. More than once, she had never said it to Marcus's face. Until today, she had never needed to. By 2:55, folding chairs were full. The efficient, Reverend Otis Green, stood at the arch checking his watch. And Diane Kowalski was standing in her own driveway, with her phone already dialed to 911, watching 60 strangers celebrate on a lawn she had decided, without evidence, belonged to a different Cedar Hollow than the one she wanted. "What's your emergency, ma'am?" the dispatcher asked. "There's a huge illegal gathering next door," Diane said, her voice climbing into a register that did not match her face. Loud music, public intoxication, probably drugs. "It's a bunch of these people who don't belong in this neighborhood." "Ma'am." Can you describe the disturbance more specifically? The dispatcher said. And there was a small pause on the line, the kind of pause that means someone on the other end has heard this exact call before and knows exactly what it is. I pay $11,000 a year in property taxes. For peace and quiet, Diane snapped. These people are turning our street into a circus. At 2:59, while she was still on the line with dispatch, Diane opened the Willow Bend Neighbors app on her phone and began a live broadcast to her 311 followers. Emergency situation on Willow Bend Court, she typed under the video. Protecting our community. The comments started arriving within a minute. Call the HOA. This is exactly why property values are dropping. Somebody has to say something. Diane read every one of them like water in a desert. She did not notice her niece by marriage, 17-year-old Jasmine Carter, standing behind the dessert table with her own phone raised, recording everything in full frame. Jasmine had grown up 2 streets over from a woman exactly like Diane, and she knew, with the flat certainty of a teenager who has seen this movie before, exactly what was about to happen, and exactly how important it was that somebody keep the camera running. "Y'all need to see this," Jasmine murmured into her phone, tilting it toward her aunt's driveway. 23 viewers. 41. The numbers climbed the way water climbs a drain when you pull the plug the wrong direction. Marcus heard the sirens before he saw the cars. He did not reach for his phone. He did not raise his voice. He simply reached into his jacket, touched the folder he had carried since noon, and said quietly, to no one but himself, "Not today." But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst of it was still 11 minutes away. At 3:04, dispatch crackled through Diane's phone speaker loud enough for the whole street to hear. Unit responding, domestic disturbance, 412 Willow Bend Court, ETA 12 minutes. Diane's face lit up with something close to triumph. "Did you hear that?" She called toward the wedding party. 12 minutes until this illegal gathering gets shut down. Marcus pulled a folder from inside his jacket and stepped forward, his voice level. "Ma'am, everything here is properly permitted through the city." He held it out. Diane snatched it from his hand before he finished the sentence, flipping pages she did not read. "Permitted by who? Your cousin down at City Hall. These could be forged for all I know." Mrs. Alvarez, 79 years old, stepped onto her own porch 2 doors down, phone raised, filming through her screen door with a look on her face that was not confusion. It was recognition. The specific recognition of someone who has lived long enough to know exactly what this looks like and exactly how it ends. 3 separate doorbell cameras up and down Willow Bend Court quietly began saving footage to the cloud, the way they do every day, the way nobody thinks about until the day it matters. "Where are your papers?" Diane shouted at the catering staff, who kept arranging trays of shrimp cocktail with the practiced calm of people who have worked enough weddings to have seen worse. "I'm documenting all of this for my lawyer." A tall man in police dress blues stepped up beside Marcus without a word. This was Captain Anthony Reeves, Marcus's best man and closest friend since college. And though his uniform commanded the kind of instant respect most people notice from 30 feet away, Diane was too far inside her own certainty to see it. "Ma'am," Marcus tried again, "we've actually met. Twice. Twice. At council meetings, when you spoke about the parks contract." "I don't know where you think you live," Diane said, cutting him off, "but this is our neighborhood. We have standards." 8-year-old Tyler, Marcus's nephew, tugged at his uncle's sleeve. "Uncle Marcus, why's that lady so mad at us?" Marcus knelt down to his level, his voice gentle even as his jaw stayed tight. "Sometimes, buddy, people get scared of things they don't understand, and scared people say ugly things. It's not about you." Tyler nodded like he half believed it. Diane overheard the exchange and somehow found it in herself to be angrier. "Don't you dare turn that child into a prop for your victim act," she snapped. This is about property values. By 3:11, Jasmine's live stream had crossed 150 viewers. The comments were splitting into two camps, one cheering Diane on, the other calling her exactly what she was, and Diane, glancing at her own phone between sentences, began deleting the second kind as fast as they appeared. "I'm calling my husband," she announced to the whole yard. "He's a lawyer. We will shut this down permanently." Marcus's grandmother, Ruth, now 78, and leaning on a cane, with a small brass council pin fixed to her lapel, made her way slowly across the grass. "Young lady," she said, her voice carrying decades of quiet authority, "I have lived on this street for 41 years. This is not how neighbors treat each other." "With respect, ma'am," Diane said, not looking at her, "you don't understand what's happening to this neighborhood." "I understand it perfectly," Ruth said. "The question is whether you do." Marcus checked his watch. 3:13. The ceremony had been scheduled for 3:15. Behind him, Simone stood among her bridesmaids, her jaw set, her eyes bright and furious, and trying very hard not to spill over in front of 200 strangers who were about to become several thousand. Police arrived at 3:16. Two patrol cars rounded the corner of Willow Bend Court, and something in the air on that lawn changed instantly, the way a room changes when a teacher walks in. Officer Diaz and Officer Turner stepped out, scanning white linens, a string quartet, a 3-tier cake under a shade canopy, and finding absolutely nothing that matched the words "illegal gathering." Diane rushed toward them, phone raised, broadcasting to now 312 viewers. "Officers, thank God. These people have been terrorizing the neighborhood. Noise violations, blocked driveways, and I'm fairly sure narcotics." "Ma'am, this looks like a private wedding," Officer Turner said carefully. "What exactly is the disturbance?" Diane thrust her phone toward him, showing the live stream count like it was evidence in itself. "Look at this. They've turned a quiet residential street into a block party." Behind her, Jasmine's own broadcast had climbed past 800 viewers, the comments arriving faster than she could read them. "This woman is unhinged. Someone help that bride. This is going everywhere." A TikTok account 2 houses down switched angles to capture Diane's face mid-sentence, and the hashtag Cedar Hollow wedding began climbing local trending lists within minutes. "I demand you cite them for the HOA violation," Diane said, waving a printed sheet of guidelines. "Section 14 prohibits excessive gatherings without notification." Marcus stepped forward, hands open and visible. "Officers, I apologize for the confusion. Everything is permitted through the city, if you'd like to verify." "Verify with who?" Diane snapped, snatching at the folder again. "Your friend at City Hall? These could be fake." Officer Diaz's radio crackled. He stepped aside, spoke into his shoulder mic for 11 seconds, and came back with a look on his face that had not been there 30 seconds earlier. A look that Diane, still narrating to her audience, did not notice at all. "We need to verify the permit and check the noise level before we do anything," Officer Diaz said. "Verify, verify." Diane's voice rose an octave. "I'm a tax-paying resident of this community. My word should be enough." Marcus's mother, standing near the guest chairs, quietly checked her blood sugar monitor, her hands not quite steady. Children clung to parents' legs, confused by the volume of adult anger in the air. Mr. Kozlov, 3 houses down, wandered over with a decibel meter app open on his phone. 58 decibels, he announced helpfully. City ordinance allows 75 until 10 p.m. "Numbers don't matter when the whole character of this street is under attack," Diane said, ignoring him entirely, and turned back to her phone. She had 127 new comments on the neighborhood app in the last 10 minutes. Some agreed with her. Others did not. "Diane, this feels excessive," one read. "Maybe just let people celebrate." She deleted it before finishing the sentence. "Officers," she said, straightening her shoulders for the camera. "I have documented everything. Noise levels, blocked traffic, suspicious behavior. This is about protecting this community from certain elements. The word certain hung in the air like something spilled. A ripple went through the crowd, even among the guests who had, until that second, been giving her the benefit of the doubt. On 3 separate live streams at once, the comments detonated. Did she just say what I think she said? Screenshot that. Somebody stop this woman. Marcus's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. His uncle, Reverend Green, put a steadying hand on his shoulder, the kind of touch that says I know, and also, not yet. 2 more patrol cars arrived, drawn not by any real disturbance, but by the size of the crowd, now filling the sidewalk with phones raised. Sergeant Renee Blake stepped out, took one look at the scene, and asked her officers quietly what exactly they were dealing with. Noise complaint, sir, ma'am. Everything looks properly permitted, Officer Turner said. Diane overheard and came apart completely. Within limits? Look at this. Loud music, probably drugs, probably gang activity, probably immigration violations. Marcus stood very still. He did not raise his voice. He did not look away. His hands, at his sides, closed slowly into fists, and then, deliberately, opened again. Watch what he does not do, because that is the whole of him in this moment. He does not shout. He does not defend himself. He simply waits the way a man waits, who has already decided how this will end, and is only sorry it has to end this way in front of his own grandmother. A news van from Channel 9 rounded the corner, drawn by the same viral current pulling in everyone else. Reporter Lauren Cole climbed out with a cameraman already rolling. Diane's eyes lit with something that looked, for one terrible second, like relief. Finally, she said, someone who will tell the truth. Ma'am, can you explain the situation? Lauren Cole asked, microphone extended. These people moved in and think they can do whatever they want, Diane said into the camera. Loud music, blocked traffic, no respect for the neighborhood. We pay premium taxes for peace and quiet. By now, Jasmine's stream alone had crossed 1,500 viewers. Diane's own neighbors were recognizing her voice from 3 different feeds at once. A second channel affiliate van pulled up behind the first. Marcus checked his watch. 3:27. The ceremony should have started 12 minutes ago. His bride stood with her hands folded in front of her, no longer trying to hide that she was crying. Though her tears were not the kind anyone in that yard would have called defeat. Officers, Marcus said, quietly, my wife has waited long enough. May we proceed? Proceed. Diane planted herself directly in front of the wedding arch, arms crossed. You are not proceeding anywhere until this illegal assembly is sorted out. Ma'am, you need to step aside, Officer Diaz warned. You're interfering with a legally permitted event. I am protecting my community, Diane shouted, loud enough for every camera on the street to catch it clean. Someone has to take a stand against this invasion. The word invasion landed like a stone through glass. Nobody moved. The quartet, which had somehow kept playing through everything up to that point, finally stopped mid-phrase, the cellist's bow frozen an inch above the string. For 3 full seconds, Willow Bend Court held its breath. Even Diane seemed to hear, a half-second too late, exactly what she had just said out loud in front of 4 news cameras and 2,000 strangers online. Marcus reached into his jacket, not for his phone, for the leather case he had carried, folded flat since noon. Ma'am, he said, and something in his voice made every conversation on that lawn stop at once. I think there has been a fundamental misunderstanding here. He slid off his jacket and laid it over his arm, revealing a dress shirt with the Cedar Hollow city seal embroidered small and precise on the collar, the kind of detail no one notices until they are looking for it. He opened the leather case and drew out a laminated identification card and walked toward Officer Diaz with the unhurried calm of a man who has never once had to raise his voice to be heard. Good afternoon, officer, he said, extending the card. Officer Diaz looked at it for 1 second. His posture changed instantly, shoulders back, chin up, the whole shift of a man realizing, mid-sentence, exactly how badly the last 20 minutes had gone. "Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor," he said, and his voice carried clean across a lawn that had gone dead silent. Diane's phone nearly slipped out of her hand. On 3 separate live streams at once, chat exploded into chaos. "Wait, what did he say? Mayor? Is that the actual mayor? Oh my God." She called the cops on the mayor. "Screenshot everything, right now." "Mayor," Diane repeated, the word not fitting in her mouth. "What does that mean? How do you know my name?" "I'm Marcus Bennett, mayor of Cedar Hollow," he said evenly. "We've met twice, actually. At the council session where you spoke about the park's maintenance contract, and again at the ribbon cutting for Founders Park in March." He paused. "I live at 412. Blue shutters, 2 doors down. We've waved to each other over the mailbox for 2 years." Diane's mind raced backward through 2 years of small interactions. The wave, the nod, the time he'd helped carry her recycling bin up from the curb after her surgery. She had never once looked closely enough to see him. "But that isn't even the part that changes everything," Marcus continued, his tone still level, still terribly calm. "Ms. Kowalski, your company holds the city's parks maintenance contract, $2.1 million a year, renewed under my signature every January for the last 5 years. The color drained from Diane's face in real time, in front of 4 cameras, and now nearly 3,000 live stream viewers combined. Her son, 26-year-old Brett Kowalski, worked part-time as a groundskeeper for that same city parks department, a fact that was about to matter a great deal more than anyone standing on that lawn understood yet. "I never meant anything racial," Diane said, her voice cracking. "I was worried about noise and property values, that's all." "You're twisting my words, twisting them," Marcus repeated. "Let's not twist anything." He reached for the same folder Diane had thrown back at him 20 minutes earlier and opened it calmly. "Permit number CH40217, filed in March, approved in April, posted for public comment for 30 days, as required. Fee paid in full. $2 million in liability coverage, on file." He looked up. "Everything you called fake was sitting as on your own front step for a month before today, in a public notice you could have read at any point." Officer Diaz checked the paperwork with his phone scanner. "Confirmed valid, sir. Noise levels well within residential limits." Captain Reeves stepped forward, removing his cap. "I can also confirm his identity, for the record. I'm Captain Anthony Reeves, and I'm the groom's best man." Sergeant Blake approached Marcus with visible discomfort. "Sir, our apologies for the disruption on your wedding day." "No apology needed, Sergeant," Marcus said. "You responded to a citizen complaint the way you're trained to. That's not the problem here." "Miss Kowalski, would you like to review the footage before we go any further?" Marcus asked, gesturing at the 4 news cameras, and the phones still recording from every porch on the street. "Your remarks have been captured from 17 separate angles and viewed at this point by roughly 9,000 people in real time." "I never meant it that way," Diane repeated. Quieter now, the fight starting to leave her voice, though not, notably, the certainty in her eyes. Marcus pulled a tablet from a folder his wedding planner had been holding, and this, more than anything, is the moment worth remembering, because he did not raise his voice once. He did not need to. Numbers do the shouting for you, if you let them. "In 2022, your company signed the city's updated vendor agreement," he said. "Section 9 includes an explicit non-discrimination clause. You signed it yourself, on page 4. He turned the tablet toward her. "Your business has also grown 23% since that agreement went into effect, largely from projects in some of the most diverse neighborhoods in this county. The irony, Miss Kowalski, is that the very community you just called an invasion is the reason your company can make payroll." Reporter Lauren Cole pushed forward with her microphone. Mayor Bennett, what happens now? Municipal vendor contracts require a 3-step review, Marcus said, still calm, still measured, still, somehow, gracious. Immediate performance evaluation. A public hearing within 72 hours, and a community impact assessment. That hearing will be live-streamed, for transparency. Your Honor, Diane said, her voice thin now. Please, I have 23 employees. Their families depend on this. One mistake shouldn't end everything I've built. Marcus was quiet for a moment. One mistake would suggest this was isolated, he said finally. What you said today revealed something you've apparently believed for a long time. These are my neighbors, my family, my constituents. What you said about their right to exist peacefully on this street is not a small thing, and I won't pretend it is to make this easier for either of us. He turned toward the crowd, addressing the cameras and the guests, and indirectly, the several thousand strangers now watching from their kitchens and cars and office break rooms across 3 time zones. I'd ask that, whatever happens next, we remember there are people whose jobs have nothing to do with this, and whose lives shouldn't be collateral damage in it either. Justice here should be firm, but it should also be fair. Then he turned back to Diane one last time. I'll see you Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock, City Council chambers. The wedding finally began at 3:41, 41 minutes late. In front of 200 guests, 4 news crews, and roughly 11,000 people watching across 3 separate live streams. Reverend Green opened with words that landed differently than they would have an hour earlier. We gather today to celebrate love in the face of everything trying to convince us it isn't possible. Marcus took Simone's hands. His fingers found the magnolia pin on his lapel for 1/2 second, out of habit, and then let it go. Diane watched the ceremony from behind her own front curtain, barely parted, her phone buzzing with calls she did not answer. By evening, the story led every local newscast. Mayor's wedding disrupted by neighbors' racist tirade, city contract under review. One Chiron read, Kowalski Premier Grounds' online reviews collapsed overnight, 4,000 one-star ratings arriving within 18 hours, most of them citing the video rather than the landscaping. Tuesday morning, the council chambers were full past capacity for the first time in anyone's memory. Diane arrived with an attorney and a prepared statement, her hands shaking around the paper. I displayed unconscious bias and catastrophically poor judgment, she read. My words do not reflect the values I want my company to stand for. Marcus recused himself entirely from the vote, handing the review to Deputy Mayor Patricia Nguyen. 23 residents testified over 4 hours. Mrs. Alvarez spoke last, her English careful and precise. In 40 years on this street, she said, I never heard words that ugly at a happy day. But I also remember when Diane drove me to the hospital and back, twice, and never once asked to be thanked for it. People carry more than one truth inside them at the same time. That does not excuse what she did. It only means change might be possible if she wants it badly enough. The committee's decision balanced the ledger carefully. Kowalski Premier Grounds would remain a city contractor, but on 18 months of probation, with quarterly diversity audits and a signed commitment that any further violation would mean immediate termination of the contract. Diane herself was required to complete 40 hours of community relations training and 100 hours of service at the Cedar Hollow Community Center, the same center that served the very families she had insulted on her own street. This isn't about punishing you into silence, Deputy Mayor Nguyen told her. It's about whether you can prove, with your actions, and not just your words, that you understand what you did. 6 months later, at a community picnic in Founders Park, Diane stood behind a folding table, serving lemonade to children whose names she had, that afternoon in April, refused to learn. Her hands were steadier than they had been in months. I didn't understand how my words landed on other people, she told a small crowd during the center's open mic hour, because nobody had ever made me sit still long enough to hear it back. I'm not asking anyone to forget what I said. I'm asking for the chance to be measured by what I do next. Her son Brett, still working for the city parks department, had spent those same 6 months quietly telling anyone who asked that his mother had cried every night that first week, not from embarrassment, but from something closer to recognition. Whitmore had built an entire identity on being a good neighbor. Watching herself on video had forced her to see the version of herself that had been sitting underneath that identity the whole time, waiting. A year after the wedding, Cedar Hollow was written up in a regional planning journal as a case study in accountable local governance. Not because the story ended in a punishment, but because it ended in a process, one that gave a place for genuine change to be tested rather than simply declared. Kowalski Premier Grounds hired 3 new employees that year from the very neighborhood Diane had once dismissed, not because a contract required it, but, she said later, because they turned out to be some of the best hires her company had ever made. On the 2nd anniversary of the wedding, Marcus and Simone hosted the same barbecue in Founders Park that had become, without anyone planning it, an annual tradition on Willow Bend Court. Diane came as she had the year before, this time bringing a tray of her own potato salad instead of a folding chair full of complaints. She and Ruth Bennett sat together for nearly an hour on a park bench, not because everything between them was resolved, but because Ruth, who had spent 40 years building the exact kind of quiet dignity that outlasts every ugly Saturday afternoon, believed that people who are willing to sit still and listen have usually earned the chance to keep trying. Marcus touched the small brass magnolia pin on his lapel that afternoon, the same one his father had worn for 11 years, the same one that had been there on the worst day of his wedding and every ordinary day since. He didn't say anything about it. He didn't have to. Some things you only need to touch once in a while to remember why you're still standing where you're standing. The street was quiet that evening, the way it had been quiet before any of this happened, before phones and cameras and 11,000 strangers had ever known the name Willow Bend Court existed. Children ran between the folding tables. The string quartet, hired again this year as a small joke between Marcus and Simone, played the same song that had frozen mid-note 2 years earlier, and this time nobody stopped it before the last note landed.